Okay, I'd like to now, hi everyone. We're going to get started. I apologize for the slight delay in starting. Technical difficulties, hopefully we'll get the mic situation sorted out. This one seems to be working. Others are working? Okay, great. So I'm now going to call to order the Civic Engagement Commission's first public hearing, focused on the proposed methodology for full site language assistance programs. Welcome everyone, including anyone who is participating through the live stream. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. For people in the audience, if you have not already done so, please add your name to the sign-in sheet, and also there should be a signature sheet for the commissioners going around as well. The sign-in sheet for the commissioners, when you get it, please sign it. Members of the press who are in attendance, please connect with Daniel Abramson, who is the Director of Communication and Intergovernmental Affairs, the person in the back raising his hand. As I mentioned, we are being live streamed today as part of the open meeting guidelines. We also have live captioning and interpreters who will provide translation in Spanish, Urdu, Mandarin, Cantonese, French, and Haitian Creole today. If anyone would like interpretation and has not already received the device, please make this request at the check-in table outside the room. Also want to thank all the interpreters for being here. Are there any individuals who have not signed up to speak but would like to offer a comment up to 3 minutes long? Anyone who wants to testify can please sign up at the table until 6 p.m. Okay. As a reminder, the purpose of the hearing today is to hear from the public on the Civic Engagement Commission's proposed methodology for full site language assistance. This methodology provides a strategy to determine the languages and full sites to be served by this program. The Commission was required to make this proposed methodology public by January 1, to open a comment period that was at least 30 days long, and to hold a public hearing to consider the public's feedback and possible revisions to the methodology. The Commission's comment period is open until March 1st, and we welcome comments via email and through our online form that's posted on the Commission's website. All of the comments that we receive will be considered during the revision of this proposed methodology, and the final methodology will be published on April 1st and administered during the November 2020 general election. Before I ask the Civic Engagement Commissioners to briefly introduce themselves by name and affiliation, I wanted to acknowledge a few people who are here today, who are really key to getting us to this moment. So I want to first thank the Commission staff who helped orchestrate and organize the logistics of today. Members of the Commission's Language Assistance Advisory Committee who are here, thank you. And even if you're not here, thank you. Key partners from the administration who have been very much a part of the thinking and analysis that informed this strategy. Kwame Akosa from the Law Department, who has been keeping us on course with the charter requirements. Peter Lobo, the Deputy Director of the Population Division in the Department of City Planning. Asher Ross, the Data Director of Mayor's Community Affairs Unit. Commissioner Bita Mustafi from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, and Sabrina Fong, the Deputy Director of Research at the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. As you know, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs has been supporting language access throughout the city and helps to provide agencies with guidance and support so that we may better serve the linguistically diverse communities of New York City. Moya has been running a pole site pilot program for pole site interpretation throughout the city for 3 years now, and they will continue to provide language assistance through the upcoming special elections and the primary in March, April, and June. Beginning in November 2020, as required by the Charter, the Civic Engagement Commission will assume the operation of this pole site language assistance program. The comments that we take from you today will be used to revise the Civic Engagement Commission's proposed methodology that will be implemented in November. So I'd like to now ask the commissioners to introduce themselves. I realize I did not introduce myself. My name is Sarah Said, and I'm the Chair and Executive Director of the New York City Civic Engagement Commission, and I'm going to go to my right.
Hi, my name is Chuck Gillian, and I'm representing the great and diverse borough of Queens.
Good afternoon, my name is Marc Diller, and I'm the designee from the borough of Manhattan.
Hi everyone, Linda Lee with KCS Green Community Services, also in Queens.
Hi, I'm Commissioner Holland Bonner, and I represent the borough of Staten Island.
Hi, I'm Anastasia Somoza, and I'm Speaker Corey Johnson's appointee to the commission.
Hi, I'm Eve Barron. I'm with the Pratt Institute, and I am the Brooklyn Borough President's appointee.
Good evening, my name is Aneta Sicharan, and I'm the Executive Director of Chaya Community Development Corporation, based in Queens, and I am a mayoral appointee to the commission.
Good evening, I'm Donna Gill from Central Harlem, still in Manhattan. And I'm the mayoral appointee as well.
Hi, good evening. I'm Lillian Perez. I'm the Bronx Borough Commissioner. I'm also Vice President of Montefiore Health System in the Bronx and Northern Counties.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Murad Awada. I am a mayoral appointee from Brooklyn, and in my professional capacity, I am the Executive Vice President of Advocacy and Strategy at the New York Immigration Coalition.
Okay, thank you so much to all the commissioners. Just as a reminder, if you walked in late and if you'd like to testify and have not previously signed up, please do sign up at the welcome table in the back. We will keep the sign-up period open until 6 p.m. So hopefully we will have you sign up and look forward to hearing from you. So as we prepare to open for the public's comments, I wanted to go over the program and how we'll be running today's hearing. As a first step, we will have a brief presentation and overview of the methodology by Guggen Cord, the Commission's advisor on language access and community boards. After that, we will go right into the comment period, and each commenter will have 3 minutes to offer their comments. We will be running a timer to help us stay on track. After the commenter finishes, the commissioners will have the opportunity to ask 2 to 3 clarifying questions. I will not go over 3 questions. These are only questions that you may ask of the person offering comments. We will not discuss the comments until all the comments are completed and have been received. If the commissioners do not have any questions, I may also turn to some of the staff who've been working on the proposed methodology to see if they have any questions to ask the commenters as well. Do any of the commissioners have any comments on the process I just explained? So I'm going to ask Guggen to begin the presentation, and you need the PowerPoint for that, is that correct?
Thank you.
Hi folks, my name is Evie Torres, I'm advisor for language access and community boards with the Civic Engagement Commission. We are so grateful to have all of you join us to be part of the review and public feedback portion of the proposed methodology. So we're going to run through the Civic Engagement Commission's proposed methodology for the full site language assistance program. So the New York Civic Engagement Commission is mandated to consider a few factors when creating a proposed methodology for the full site language assistance program. These factors include, but are not limited to, relevant data from the most recent American Community Survey from the U.S. Census Bureau, locations of full sites and boundaries of election districts, information related to voter turnout, and any other information that's deemed appropriate by the New York City Civic Engagement Commission. So this methodology outlines how the Commission is going to determine which poll sites are likely to have a significant concentration of speakers with limited English proficiency of the designated citywide languages. And the way that designated citywide languages is defined is the 10 most commonly spoken citywide languages, and is also rooted in Local Law 30 of 2017. So the New York City Charter also specifies, like I said, how to choose languages that will be considered program-eligible languages. So the first step is you're mandated to prioritize designated citywide languages, which are spoken by nearly 85% of New Yorkers with limited English proficiency. And the 85% number comes from the 2018 American Community Survey. And the designated citywide languages are Spanish, Chinese, Russian, Haitian Creole, Korean, Bangla, Arabic, Polish, Urdu, and French. The Commission may also consider adding an additional language if the number of speakers with limited English proficiency of a given language is greater than the number of individuals who speak the lowest ranked citywide language. Right? So the first step is prioritizing designated citywide languages. The second is adding an additional one if the number of individuals who have limited English proficiency is greater than the number of individuals who speak the lowest ranked citywide language. We're going to come back to this, so don't get confused. It's okay. And the third thing that charter mandates that we consider is that we may not provide duplicative services. We may not provide language assistance in counties that the New York City Board of Elections already provides services in. So the data the CEC is using in the proposed methodology is the American Community Survey 2017 one-year estimates and the American Community Survey 2013 to 2017 five-year estimates. And let's define the American Community Survey. The American Community Survey is an annual census survey that gathers on social and economic characteristics of communities. I also want to note that the final methodology, which will be published April 1st, 2020, will only use the most recent five-year data that was not yet accessible at the time the proposed methodology was published. So let's go through a couple of different data sets to consider what we're gathering from the data sets. So the first one we're looking at is a U.S. Census Bureau 5-year American Community Survey. This is what we will be using for our final methodology. And we use the ACS 5-year data because it gives us information on citizenship, on what language folks speak, on English proficiency, on age, or the 18 plus. So it represents the universe of citizens of voting age with limited English proficiency. And the data information that we're missing from the ACS is whether those individuals are registered to vote. So we gather that information by overlaying the voter rolls from the New York City Board of Elections. And the two latter data sets are data sets that we were asked to consider as additional sets to validate the data. The reason we're not considering the New York City Department of Education Parent Survey is because it only gives us information on language which we already gathered from the ACS data, along with the NYC data, which again only gives us information on language and doesn't provide any additional information that we need for this methodology. So, step one in the methodology is to identify program eligible languages. As we said earlier, per the charter, the Civic Engagement Commission shall start with the designated citywide languages. So the table that you see here, the languages listed in the blue are either designated citywide languages or per charter, we can determine whether to provide services in non-designated citywide languages. And you can see that Yiddish is a non-designated citywide language. And we are providing services in Yiddish because the number of LEP speakers of Yiddish is greater than the number of LEP speakers of the lowest ranked designated citywide language. And in addition, it has at least one pool site which is likely to have a significant concentration of speakers with limited English proficiency of such language. And the total number of LEP New Yorkers that you see on the right is the total number of New Yorkers with limited English proficiency that speak a program eligible language in counties that are eligible for services by the New York City Board of Elections. So you may be looking at Chinese and wondering why the number is so low, and that's because we exclude individuals that are receiving services in Queens, for example. Step two. Oh, actually, just let me remind everyone what counties the Board of Elections provide services in which languages, which is also shared in the proposed methodology. So as per the Voting Rights Act, the Board of Elections must provide services in the following languages in counties. They must provide coverage of Spanish and Chinese in New York or Manhattan, Spanish and Chinese in Kings County or Brooklyn, coverage of Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Bangla, Hindi, Punjabi in Queens, and coverage of Spanish in Bronx and Richmond County, which is Staten Island. So one thing we noticed from there is that Spanish is covered in all 5 counties by the New York City Board of Elections, and therefore is excluded in our analysis because the Civic Engagement Commission may not duplicate any services that the Board of Elections already provide services to. So once we've done that, so the first chart looked at the total number of New Yorkers with limited English proficiency. The second table looks at the total number of New Yorkers with limited English proficiency that are citizens of voting age. Right, so they're 18 plus and they're eligible voters. So you can see the number has gone down from table 1 to table 2. The next step in the methodology is to determine the total number of poll sites to be served for each of the eligible languages using the proportionality approach. And the reason for using the proportionality approach is to be consistent with the city's policy and practice to serve individuals in designated citywide languages. It is also to promote inclusivity. This approach allows us to provide services in more languages, and also it addresses need and is an effective deployment of finite resources. So, in this hypothetical, we are sharing, so for example, if we are able to provide services at 100 sites, Russian has 89,600 limited speakers with limited English proficiency that are citizens of voting age. That total number, that number is, sorry, 1 second. So I'm trying to get used to the simultaneous interpretation as well. Because I understand it, so I'm like, so Russian, we have 89,600 speakers out of 211,400 of the total number of LEP speakers that are citizens of voting age. So therefore, Russian makes up 42% of the total 100 and will be allocated 42 out of 100 sites. I'm sorry, can I just be like loud and clear for the captions? Absolutely, and honestly, it's great that I repeat this again. So because Russian has 42% of the total 100. It is allocated 42 sites out of 100 sites in this hypothetical. And again, this is like just to demonstrate how the personality approach would work for language. So going down, Haitian Creole, 29,200 out of the total 211,400 LET speakers that are citizens of voting age, making up 14%, therefore allocated 14 out of 100 sites. Step 4. So this actually is, I'm going to read through it, but be patient with me because we have visuals after as well. So for step 4, the first step in step 4 is to determine the citizen voting age, limited English proficient concentrations in the area surrounding all poll sites. So looking at poll sites and seeing where, for each program eligible language, where are the New Yorkers with limited English proficiency that are citizens of voting age. Then we rank order the poll sites from highest to lowest concentration for each language. So for Russian, we would go from the highest concentration and keep allocating down until we hit that 42 number, apologies. And then step 3, or C, is to select poll sites with the highest concentration for each language until the proportional allotment is met for that language. So pick the 42 sites, poll sites with the highest concentration for Russian, but what if the 42nd site does not have a significant concentration of limited English proficient speakers that are eligible voters? In that case, if there are fewer poll sites with significant concentrations than allocated for a given language, consider allocating interpretation resources to a different language with greater need. So in that case, we may allocate that site to Urdu or Bangla or whatever site has the next highest concentration. And you can see how we overlaid the 2 data sets. So in this image, you can see we're testing, this is Russian limited English proficiency at the census tract level. The little polygons that you see are approximately the size of a neighborhood. The deeper red is where the highest concentration of Russian speakers with limited English proficiency, where eligible voters live. And then it goes to orange, and the lightest is yellow, which indicates the lowest concentration. We can see that the highest concentration is like right in Beach, southern Brooklyn. After, we overlay that with poll site level data. So we're taking the tract level, the concentrations of individuals who are limited English proficient eligible voters, overlaying that with poll sites, to then rank order the top 42 highest concentration sites for Russian. So in our proposed methodology, based on the 2017 ACS data that we utilized, these are our program eligible languages: Arabic, Bangla, Chinese, French, Haitian Creole, Korean, Polish, Russian, Urdu, and Yiddish. These may shift a little when we start using the 5-year data in the final methodology, which will be published April 1st, 2020. And y'all are aware of this timeline. You're here, it's public hearing, February 18th. We're publishing our final methodology April 1st, taking in all of the public comments and testimony that y'all are sharing with us today. If folks have any questions on the presentation, we can connect after the public hearing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Guggen, for taking us through that presentation. So now I'm going to open up the floor for people to offer comments on the methodology. And we are going to first call on, did you say I need to do Aaron first? Okay, sorry. I would like to call on Erin Hanif, the CEO and Executive Director of UPNA Community Services, to please come and offer a comment. Do we have, am I using my timer? Are we doing it on the screen? Oh. Just turn on the mic when you speak.
Hello. Okay. Good evening and Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Iram Hanif. I am the CEO of Apna Brooklyn Community Center and Director of Apna Adult Daycare Center. Apart from that, I am also a member of Community Board 13 and co-president of PS253 Parent Teacher Association. I want to thank New York City Civic Engagement Commission for creating a whole-site language assistance program that will provide interpreters at New York City whole sites to assist limited language English proficient voters with navigating the voting process, and thanks to the chair of the New York City Civic Engagement Commission, Dr. Sarah Said, for creating this opportunity for testimony on the benefits of whole-site language assistance program. Apna Brooklyn Community Center is the only Muslim organization in Brighton Beach, managed and staffed by immigrant Muslims from South Asia, who have cultural, religious, and language abilities to be able to communicate and to be accepted by the underserved Muslim population. Apna's staff has developed competency in applying for and receiving federal, state, and city entitlement services to our residents. The Brooklyn neighborhood of Brighton Beach and Coney Island are home to diverse communities of recent immigrants from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and several Central American communities. Members of these communities are not native English speakers and have difficulty navigating the government social service system. Apna helps bridge this gap, ensuring the communities we serve can navigate and benefit from the services that help them live safe, healthy, and fulfilled life. Apna's mission is to bridge this gap through community education, engagement, and empowerment. Islam is the second largest, fastest growing religion in the US with an estimate of 3.5 million in the United States as of 2015. Many assume that all Muslim Americans are immigrants, even though more than 40% of the 3.45 million Muslims in America are born here. And even more pervasive truth of the Muslim Americans is that we are all Arabs or South Asians, when in fact about 41% are white, 28% are Asian, and 20% are black. Throughout its history, New York City has been a major point of entry for immigrants. As many as 800 languages are spoken in New York, making it the most linguistically diverse city in the world. English remains the most widely spoken language, although there are areas in the outer boroughs in which up to 25% of people speak English as a second language or have limited English proficiency. According to the United States 2010 survey, there are 192,209 Asian Indians, 53,174 Bangladeshis, 41,887 Pakistanis, and 3,696 Sri Lankans in New York City. But it should also be noted that this is formed the hard-to-count communities. Having interpreters at poll site will help these LAP voters, especially the seniors, become part of the electoral process. Currently, the majority of LAP citizens will register to vote, but when faced with a ballot that they cannot read or even they cannot see because of the very small font size of the ballot paper, will fail to participate in the election. An interpreter at the poll site would eliminate the need for a younger family member or a community member to go with them on the election day. It is important fact that interpreters being present at the polling site be advertised through the various ethnic media platforms prior to the election, prior to the primary or prior to the election days. This will increase voter turnout and organize the immigrant population for what they are, citizens of New York City. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aaron. Are there clarifying questions for Aaron from the commissioners? Anyone else? Administration folks, any questions? Okay, thank you, Aram. The next person who will speak will be Nazia Zahir, who's a member of UPNA Community Services.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Sorry. Good evening. My name is Nazia Shaheen. I am homemaker and the mother of 4 children. I am the member of Neighborhood Advisory Board 15 and a community activist. Thank you to the New York City Civic Engagement Commission for creating a pole-side language assistance program that will provide interpretation for voters. I have been working with the Apna Adult Daycare and the Apna Community Center for years now, and there is no better place like it. Every time I come to the center, I always feel like home. They are always here to help and support the community. The centers offer services to everyone, not only the elderly of the community. There are several events that are even catered to the youth. They hold clothing drives and even back to school giveaways as a way of giving back to the community for the support they have given the center. I volunteer at the center talking to the members and helping in facilitating activities for the elderly. New York is seen as a melting pot. We have so much diversity, yet we still lack accessibility for all. Many parts of New York are filled with immigrant communities and working class people. There is a great disparity of immigrant families participating in the election because of language barrier. Many do not understand English, some do speak and understand English, but that is only a handful. If we have translated a report, then the numbers of voters will increase because they will be able to understand what they are doing. The language assistance program will make it easier for the numbers of voters to rise and allow for people to come out their comfort zone and have their voices heard. This is especially beneficial for seniors. Thank you, New York City Civic Engagement Commission, for your dedication to these issues, and let's work together to bridge this gap between language barriers. Thanks again.
Thank you, Nazia. Clarifying questions, Marc.
Thank you for your testimony. Are the languages that you saw in the presentation, are they sufficient, or are there different languages that you would propose that we consider in terms of achieving the goals that your testimony encouraged us to achieve?
No, that's no why it's only Urdu, the different language, like for Chinese people, for Chinese, but for me it's Urdu, for my community, on behalf of my community, I'm speaking.
So Urdu is on the list, yes?
Yes.
So, great, so very good, thank you very much.
You must have.
Anyone else? Donna?
This was very good.
Oh wait, hold on. Okay. I have some more questions.
Okay, no problem.
This was excellent. Speaking of community, I noticed that you indicated that children would have to go to the whole site with an adult to do the interpretation. Now, are you aware that the Board of Elections allows anyone to go in with the person to interpret for them? So I think that needs to be said or broadcast to the community so that if interpretation is not available, at least they know they can take another adult with them to the poll site.
Can I ask this question
Yes.
on Nathaniel's behalf? So I completely agree that it's good that the seniors can take any adult with them in terms of interpretation, but oftentimes the voting day or a time when any other adult of the family is busy in school, college, or other personal engagement. So in that scenario, the seniors have no option. They cannot go alone and cast their votes. So if the dependency will be reduced, obviously the turnout on the voting side will increase.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Clarifying questions?
I have a clarifying question. You mentioned a little bit about the font size of some of the paperwork that we have added in the polling sites. And I myself am legally blind, so I empathize with that. And that's been an issue that I've had as a New York City voter for quite a long time. Do you feel that the population in your community, the font size and the vision issues that they're having, do you think that they're only age-related, or do you think that there is another factor that is inhibiting them as far as the font size?
There are two things. One is age related because I'm community activist, so in the last elections I have been a poll watcher on some sites and I encourage my community members to go. So first is because of the seniors, because of the font size, it's very difficult to read and then mark the appropriate circle, and on top of that the names are appearing in English language. So the seniors don't know who they are voting to because the names are in English, they cannot read, they don't know, they cannot do anything. So like we have to literally tell them, oh, this is the name written, this is the councilman, this is the judge you are voting to, this is the public attorney you are voting to. So both the things, the language on the ballot paper as well as the font size, because what happened is if they are circling, it's so small, minor circle, they're circling their seniors, they have hands are shaky. Rather than on doing, circling on the appropriate box, they mistakenly do it on the other side. So means the vote is not going to get counted if they have done it on two. For one particular position, if they have casted their vote to two individuals, obviously I don't think so that vote is going to count.
Okay. Thank you for elaborating on that.
Okay, we've reached the max of 3 questions on that comment. Keep it moving. Thank you again to Amna for joining us today. The next person who is up is Jerry Guatemala from the Asian American Legal Defense Fund, an education fund. While Jerry is coming up, I would also like to acknowledge some other colleagues who are here, colleagues from the census, I believe, are outside. And also want to thank colleagues from the New York City Board of Elections who are also here with us today. Thank you. Is Jerry here? Okay. Ralph Merzel, member of the Life of Hope Center. You here? Okay. Hadi Diaby, Chuck Park, you here? Evie Torres, from the Chinese American Planning Council.
Wasn't sure if I was waiting for anyone else. Hi everyone, thank you. My name is Evie Torres. My pronouns are they and she. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at CPC, the Chinese American Planning Council. CPC is the nation's largest social services organization for Asian Americans in the country, but we're rooted solely here in New York City, which is a testament to the size of the Asian American Pacific Islander community here. We serve over 60,000 low-income and immigrant community members each year, from services spanning education, family support, and community and economic empowerment. And in addition to the services that we provide, our social change work includes civic engagement and advocacy for inclusion in many great things, including the methodology we're commenting on today. So CPC is here because Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders face very specific barriers toward voter participation and turnout. Some of which I'll be commenting on today, but I recognize that we're limited on time. So just to share quickly some of the language access issues, CPC serves communities that sit at several different intersections of language access and poverty. So we know that poverty is a very large predictor, limited English proficiency is a very large predictor of poverty for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. For those that are living in poverty, LEP rates are up to 70%. So while that is part of the community that we're working with, we also recognize that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are eligible to naturalize and register to vote at higher rates than other immigrant groups, but it's issues like language access, access to legal services that prevent this group from naturalizing, and then once they do naturalize, turning out to vote. So we were very pleased to comment on today's plan. The pace at which this commission has issued its recommendations and prioritized language access is very important to us, and we acknowledge and appreciate that. We have 5 recommendations that we'd like to share. One is expanding the source data used to select programs eligible languages. 2 is to include non-citizens and New Yorkers who are age 15 plus. Decreasing the reliance on administrative data that assumes surnames, turnout, and previous receipt of services, re-examining the types of elections and coverage during early voting, and providing additional mechanisms for the public to comment on the language program at their site. And I will pass around my testimony because I know that's on this. So the source data, we were really pleased to see that ACS, American Community Service Survey data was used, but we know the publication schedule for those reports sometimes lags, and then I know a number of my colleagues are also testifying that when you factor in the city budget process, the time from implementation to the publication of the actual collection of the ACS data can be quite long. We were a strong advocate for the city's data disaggregation plan. So intros 251A and 551A mandate that all city agencies report on language access and ethnic subgroups. We would really like to see this commission consider that data as part of their expansion of language programs. Those laws also require annual reporting of the data. So even though it's voluntarily submitted, it is much more updated and can enhance and fill in some of the gaps that may be left in the ACS data. We also recommend a decrease on the reliance of surnames, turnout, and previous receipt of services. For reasons outlined in our testimony, we know it's often language access that prevents and hinders the turnout. So we'd like to actually see in these initial years an over-investment in the services because there may be untapped turnout potential that we're not seeing because of the limited English proficiency rates within our communities. And we'd also recommend against the reliance on surnames. Many members of the API community, they're particularly from the Philippines, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, there are families who have, legacies of colonization. My own last name is Torres. I'm Filipinx, and, I would not show up, well, I'm Native English, so I wouldn't be but there are many communities who will be flattened or rendered invisible by this over-reliance on surnames. We'd also like to see a re-examination of the types of election and the coverage during early voting. So we're very pleased to see that coverage is included on that final day of the final weekend of the early voting period. We would like to see all 4 days of the early voting weekends included. And because it is the inaugural, because this is looking at turnout from the inaugural year of early voting, in a period that was only at one citywide race, we question whether that's the best way to anticipate potential turnout, especially in 2020 and 2021. So we'd like to see that coverage expanded to all 4 days. We recognize that there are budget constraints. And we'd also like to see more than just citywide races covered as well. So state and federal, primary and general elections as well. And then lastly, we're again so pleased the pace at which this commission has come together and prioritized language access. We would like to see additional ways for the public to comment on the eventual final implementation or request language access at their poll sites for future cycles as well. It's wonderful to see so many people in the room, so many friendly faces in the audience, but we would love to continue to contribute toward the success of this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Any clarifying questions for Amy from the commissioners? No.
Thank you, Amy. I had a question about your recommendation to include non-citizens and New Yorkers of age 15 plus. Can you just speak a little bit more about that and what you're
Sure. So under the The current proposal is using the ACS data that was recently published, and because of that lag period that we mentioned in our testimony, there are going to be a lot of people who naturalize in that period of time, but also because of new changes like at the state level, the changes to pre-register 16 and 17-year-olds. If we're solely relying on ACS data, we'd like to see those 15-year-olds included, because if they're then pre-registered at age 16 and 17, by the point of implementation, they'll potentially be of voting age. So we'd like to see an acknowledgement of like what that lag looks like, and by including the non-citizen population, you also acknowledge that there are going to be people who become eligible over time to naturalize. We, anecdotally, because of issues like public charge, the increase of ICE enforcement, and this general fear that is pervasive in our community, we've seen a huge amount of requests for naturalization services and naturalization application support. So we know that people are considering naturalization at higher rates than they were before. I can't quantify that in our testimony, but we'd like to see a way for the Commission to acknowledge that whatever the data set that you're looking at, there are going to be people year after year who are eligible.
Other clarifying questions? Anyone else from the administration questions for Amy? Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
The next person I'd like to invite up is Kim from the Asian American Federation.
Thank you for having us. I will be submitting our written testimony later by email. Sorry about that. My name is Kim. I'm a small business project manager at the Asian American Federation, and I'm also on the CEC Language Access Advisory Committee. The Asian American Federation seeks to strengthen New York City's Pan-Asian American population, the fastest growing in the whole city, the racial and ethnic group in the city, and we also support 70 nonprofit organizations that provide vital health and human services to Asian Americans. We accomplish our mission through our four programmatic areas of research, advocacy, direct services, and technical assistance. Just getting into it now. I have two issues to raise today, given the proposal in front of us. One on the ambiguity on the standard of need, and secondly about the operational details that I believe is missing. First of all, on the ambiguity on the standard of need, I'm sure everybody heard earlier on that there's a section in the proposed methodology that says that if there are fewer poll sites with significant concentrations that are allocated for a given language, then the CEC might consider allocating interpretation services to another language. While we do welcome the flexibility in best method of implementing interpretation services, we believe that there has to be a clearer threshold, and this has come up in the Language Advisory Committee discussion, and the answer we've gotten so far is that no such threshold has been set yet. Given that, I'd like to recommend that there be a threshold be set more clearly in near future, and also for the CEC to consider for the community to maybe ask for reconsideration once the poll sites are actually decided, if the community feels that they're not properly represented in the poll sites that are going to receive this interpretation services. Second issue is about the operational details. I understand that this methodology is mainly about which sites we're going to give these interpretation services to. However, we believe that it's important to keep in mind the problems that we see in today's interpretation services at poll sites, the issue of recruitment and quality control of the interpreters themselves. We would like to see a lot more detail in terms of how the recruitment is going to be held and what kind of education these interpreters are going to be receiving, and what kind of quality control is going to be done. I say this because as of now, I believe the MOYA is relying on a third-party vendor to recruit and train interpreters, and we'd like to ask if the CEC does have capacity to take on this as a direct service, and also if the standards for the such education or outreach and recruitment is going to be also available for public comments once the methods are set.
Thank you. Clarifying questions?
Hi. I have a question. What are your specific complaints with the third-party vendors? Are they not providing service?
So this is not about the CEC per se, but in terms of the services that are being given by DOE for right now, especially, we hear from our partner organizations where voters have been turned away at the poll sites by less aware interpreters that tell them because you're not registered, you're not allowed to vote here, you must go home. And this is not just a one-time issue, but it happens every single election, and especially so where interpreters are more less trained and come with less of an awareness of what their role is. They often seem to interject in terms of what role they have or what authority they can actually say anything to the voters with. And so we'd like to see a better form of education and outreach.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. The next person that I have on this list is Geronimo Soon, member of the Bangladeshi American Advocacy Group.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Geronimo Soon, and I'm a member of Nathaniel's Assistant Advisory Committee, also the board member of Bangladesh American Advocacy Group, a long-term board of election day worker, as well as a volunteer. Also, I'm with the other organization. It's called Bangladesh American Advocacy Group. American South Asian Community Services. Bangladesh American Advocacy Group is shortly called BAG, is an umbrella organization who is created to support and sponsor initiatives and programs to help Bangladeshi living in the state of New York. BAG is a civic engagement organization, and we engage in multilingual events, seminar programs, city services that will assist monolingual and bilingual people of Bangladeshi origin. Bangladesh American Advocacy Group is committed to working with the government agencies, community-based organization, and elected officials to better the life of Bangladeshi American community since 2011. Bangladesh American Advocacy Group was founded to give Bangladeshi immigrants a voice to the community and encourage people to demand equal political right to raise their quality of life. And Bangladeshi Advocacy Group is the voice, giving voice to the voiceless one from Bangladesh. Especially is Bengali speaking population. And Bangladesh Advocacy Group, we are in 5 boroughs, including Patterson in New Jersey and Delaware. And our vibrant community, which is Bangladeshi speaking population, is in Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and Manhattan. And mostly we are immigrant community, and we need to have a huge number and access of the language assistance program. And there is, we are thankful to the Board of Election that we had only few polling sites they have translator assistance for the language assistance, but this is not enough. This is very lack of the population we have, and citizen is all over the city and the states. So it is very important for with Bangladeshi American who speak Bengali. So I'm going to keep saying the Bengali speaking population. So Bengali speaking population is rising all over the city and the state. So that ratio, we don't have the language access in the voting pool. And there is a large, the number of the people, they are with the challenges with their language and the language barrier. Most of the time they don't go to vote because they feel very embarrassed. Because when they go to the polling site, I'm just giving one, they feel very embarrassed the way they sometimes treat. Like myself, when the first time I went to vote, the person was assisting me, the poll worker was talking to me like I'm stupid and dumb. And that's the one just made me like I'm not citizen yet. I didn't feel like I'm a part of this civics engagement. This has happened to me, just think that with those people, they don't speak English, they are elderly, they didn't have, even though sometimes they are from the other country, even though they are not literate in Bengali sometimes. So how they feel and how they feel for their voting right. So lack of Bangla assistant program or Bangla assistant or translator, what we can see that people when they come to it's a large number of the people, they are not voters because they don't feel like they are part of the voting process or voting access to go to vote because but if we have this language access program, I'm just giving you the little ratio. Like couple of years ago, 6-7 years ago, when we were demanding for having language assistant program to BUE, and there is some translator like in Brooklyn, few places, and Queens, few places. You can go and check that there is a large number of voter numbers increase in Bengali community, Bengali speaking population, because they are very comfortable when they come here, and also it's when they go back, they feel very good and they give this message to the community and community come back. They don't have to depend on anyone.
I'm sorry to interrupt, your time is up, so could you just maybe offer the closing sentence?
So just one more thing I just want to mention, like voting, if we have a language access program, then the people will be freely vote. They don't have to go to what is their family member or the person come to translate for them. They can participate their civics duty very independently. So I'm really encouraging to have this language assistant program to all over the city, and especially for Bangladeshi people and Bengali speaking people, and we can participate our civics engagements.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Any clarifying questions? Good. Thank you so much, Joanna. Next, I'd like to invite Maria Marc, who's with the Russian-speaking community.
Thank you so much. My name is Maria Marc. I'm with the Russian-speaking community. I do work for the city, but I'm here as a private individual, and so the opinions are my own. The Pulse Site Language Assistance Program has been a very important addition in helping New Yorkers for the last few years, and I have been very happy to watch the service grow and help more and more voters every year. During the Board of Elections, or due to the Board of Elections' inability to provide some of the languages that we're discussing today, it's wonderful that the city has stepped in and fought not only to get the translators to the sites, but also to get them into the buildings. During the last election, under the direction of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, and I know that the Commissioner was here earlier, there were 100 poll sites in the city, which covered Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. Of those 100 sites, 70 of them provided language access to the Russian-speaking community, and additionally, there were sites that provided language to Haitian Creole, Yiddish, Polish, and Italian. There were about 2 to 3 translators at each of these locations. Some translators were positioned in the poll sites right in front of the door, and they were clearly visible. Other sites had translators in convoluted locations with signs leading to voters through a maze before they can find anyone that can assist them at the polls. In a few big sites, there were volunteers, including myself and some of the other people from agencies, who were giving out flyers to let voters know that there were additional translation services throughout the 3 boroughs, including at those particular sites. There were some sites that were completely underutilized because voters did not know that the translation services were available to them. And I believe that one of the main things is that those voters should be informed ahead of time. That can be done through mailers in specific locations that we have those poll site interpreters at. That may be a very important way so that people actually know and then they go out to be able to use those services. And the truth is that if you have 50 poll sites or 100 or 200 poll sites, it doesn't really matter if people are using them. So you could have 5 poll sites that everybody uses, and that could be better than having 200 that no one uses. So getting that information out is very crucial. I do agree with the proposed methodology, including the additional languages that will be covered, and believe that the way that you're planning to do it is very important. And as someone previously stated today, having that threshold is very important to be able to know where that cutoff is. So if there's a threshold for potentially somewhere between 20 to 30 eligible voters that would fall within the guidelines to get those languages, that may be a good number. I mean, you could do a little bit more. I mean, having 5 potential voters may not be cost effective if you are running on a budget, but having somewhere between 20 and 30 may be a little bit more reasonable. And I do have a question and a thought about the current way that the poll site translators are done. I know that there is a capacity to have up to 4 languages in every single poll site, and in the last round there were not any poll sites that had multiple languages, but we're also including additional languages through this new methodology. And so our partners at APNA, our neighbors, who we love very, very much, they would be able to be at the Shorefront Y with the Russian-speaking community as well, and throughout the city. And then there's a question about bilingual or trilingual interpreters, because there are people who may speak multiple languages. So for example, if someone in Borough Park can speak both in Yiddish and in Russian, that can be an additional, that could be one individual who would be assisting in 2 different communities. And it may be a great thing to add more of those trilingual communities. They may be similar in the Arabic, Bengali, and Urdu locations where people do speak multiple languages.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
Okay, absolutely. And so, actually, that was the end of it. So thank you so much for giving me the time and for everybody being here for such an important cause.
Thank you, Maria. Any questions for Maria? Yep.
You mentioned in your testimony, thank you for your testimony, you mentioned in it, I understood you to say that there's a maze before you can find interpretation services. I'm wondering if that's a metaphor, or is there actually a gauntlet and physical barrier that you have to overcome?
So the poll site that I vote at, I was curious to see where the translators were, and I actually happened to have an extra barrier, which was my child in the stroller. In order to find the translators, I had to go through multiple hallways, and then when I finally did find them, there were some steps going down. So, you know, I can yell to them and they would be able to come up to me, but that was an extra very odd situation, although in other poll sites they were right at the door. So.
Any additional questions for Maria? Okay, we're gonna keep it moving. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person that I have on this list is the New York Immigration Coalition, Winnie Chen.
Hello, hi, good afternoon. My name is Winnie Chen. I am the Senior Manager of Civic Engagement at the New York Immigration Coalition. We are a policy and advocacy organization with over 150 organizations statewide. And today we're here to present our testimony on the Pole Site Language Assistance Program and methodology. For one, we want to thank the Commission for the work and diligence around creating a methodology. We believe that a standard, transparent methodology will improve language access in all of our poll sites, enhance the voting experience of voters, as well as leading to a more inclusive democracy. Upon review of the methodology, we do have a few recommendations to share, some of which has been highlighted by previous testimonies. But our 4 recommendations are: 1, around the data set, to not remove 15 to 17-year-olds from the methodology, as well as the inclusion of non-citizens from the methodology. Our second recommendation is to not use turnout or utilization data of past services as factors in determining future usage. And 3 is the standardizing the language access services for all elections during the early voting period. And to speak more pointedly on the first recommendation is the timeliness of the ACS data. As previous testimony has pointed out, and in the methodology, I know that it points to the 2018 PUMA data. However, if you factor in the city budget, 2 of the 3 elections this year, especially the primaries, happened within fiscal year 2020, which was approved in 2019, so that means we're using the 2017 data. So inherently, for 2 of the 3 elections this year, not including the special elections, we are using 3-year-old data. So what does that mean for us? That means that that data is not inclusive of the, is not inclusive of the populations and the changes within the population. And so our recommendation is to mitigate those changes by including non-citizens and 15 to 17-year-olds. Particularly, every year about 86,000 residents of New York State become naturalized citizens, and the numbers for 15 to 17-year-olds becoming 18-year-olds and entering the electorate is about the same number. So if you look at that, that's about 70,000 individuals per year over the course of 3 years because of the data lag. Then we're looking at close to 500,000 voters that's not included in the current methodology. So we encourage to include those 2 populations, but also to speak more pointedly, as we're in the thick of the census conversation, we know that the Census Bureau and their many of their operations historically undercount communities of color, and particularly communities that are would benefit the most from language services. So we believe that a more expansive methodology and a more expansive data set that does not exclude non-citizens will offset reoccurring undercounts of the same communities who are most in need of these language services. Our second recommendation is around turnout. Turnout is notoriously difficult to predict, and we believe that under the current methodology, we are using turnout and utilize past usage data, and we believe that this is not the best way in determining future usage, because 1, we should be anticipating future usage and not we believe that we should look forward and anticipate the need rather than look at how the needs in the past were met. People previously have not been using these services because they were not well advertised, they were not well serviced, and poor promotion of the services altogether has caused a lack of utilization. And we think that moving forward, as this transitions to a program that is long-standing, we believe that usage would increase, and we hope that we can kind of not let the usage and our determination of which poll sites are included and which languages are included through the turnout and past utilization data. And then my last point is around early voting. As previously stated, we are currently in the nascent phases of early voting, and our state's voters are just being accustomed to early voting. So, when under the current methodology, it is very confusing because not all weekends under the early voting period is covered. So we believe that that would create confusion amongst our voters, and we prefer a standardization, and we hope that we wouldn't have to limit interpretation services for early voting to just one weekend and to elections containing a citywide race, because if you look at the Queens elections, Queens is one of the most diverse, language diverse counties, and an election there is critical to provide the services that's not included within the current BOE provided services. So we recommend a standard application of language services for all elections during the early voting period. We intend on submitting written testimony, so please look forward to that. My last comment is around something that's touched on before, is recruitment, the quality of interpretation, training of poll site workers, and also, for me, what is most important is feedback from the public. We hope that in the future methodology or proposed methodology, these things can be considered and can be spelled out in a process that is coherent for our voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Any clarifying questions?
It would be great if you can have the written testimony because you covered so much.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a preliminary copy that I'm happy to share with you. I just want to include better data, but I can pass this around, and we will share a more comprehensive copy.
I couldn't keep up with all the great stuff.
Yes, so to Winnie
I'm
and
very
to
cognizant of that 3-minute mark. I've been beat within 1 minute before, so. Yeah.
So to Winnie and to everyone else who has spoken and will be speaking, if you have not given us a written version of your comment, please do so. You can email it to us. You can also submit it online. It's going to be very critical for us to have this information in writing as we're reviewing the feedback. Okay, the next person that I have here on the list, next organization listed is Arab American Association of New York. Is Yafat Diaz here?
Hello, my name is Thomas Dover, and I'll be speaking instead of Ms. Diaz. I want to start by thanking the Civic Engagement Commission for the work that it's doing here and the work that this project aims to accomplish. In the Arab American community, undervoting because of a lack of translation at poll sites is a critical error. And as our community tries to play a bigger part in civic life here in New York, the work that this commission is doing is going to be incredibly important. A large proportion of the work that AAA-NY does is helping recent immigrants from the Arab world gain their citizenship and gain the right to vote. And there's a little bit of an irony in people investing as much time, effort, and emotional labor in gaining their citizenship, only to be unable to vote at the polling sites because of inadequate poll site translation. So this is incredibly important work, and we're very grateful that it is being done. We only have a limited amount of new information to add. We really just want to reinforce a number of the points that have been made by previous speakers, particularly the points brought up by the New York Immigration Commission. Essentially, it is a situation where we agree with their key recommendations, namely not removing 15 to 17-year-olds from methodology, as well as not removing non-citizens on the basis that, for exactly as stated before, these two populations not only are going to either be recent voters or contribute significantly to the proportions in these communities that do require assistance. And as a result of that, we think it is important to consider them in determining locations for polling sites. Additionally, standing by the recommendations to eliminate turnout and utilization of past services as factors to be considered, and applying a standard application of language services for all elections during early voting. That is one that is particularly of note. We're thrilled about the new accommodations that have been put in to allow for early voting in New York, but especially as it's a concept that for a lot of recent immigrants can be somewhat difficult to fully understand and grasp, making sure that there are translation services available at those early voting sites to make the process more accessible and more open to and all immigrant communities is incredibly important. Beyond that, we only have, as I said, extremely limited new information to add. Essentially, we just wanted to thank the Commission for the work that you're doing, and to say that as long as certain accommodations are made, as has been pointed out by other speakers, we're really looking forward to working with the Commission and opening up these elections in the coming months to thousands of new New Yorkers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any clarifying questions? Okay. Thank you. Next I have from Common Cause, Susan Warner.
Thank you very much. I'm Susan Lerner. I'm the Executive Director of Common Cause New York. Common Cause is a 50-year-old organization that works to improve and make our democracy more effective and inclusive. We have a presence in 36 states, and the New York chapter is one of our most active. I'm delighted to be here today, and I want to thank you for tackling what is frankly a very challenging task. Common Cause New York has been a strong supporter of the expansion of translation services over the last several years, and we've worked with Moya to help develop some of the trainings and work directly with translators. And we also spent significant time on election day going around to the polling places to which translators were assigned, tremendously frustrated with the way in which the Board of Elections at that time kept the translators at a distance. And I know there's been some testimony about the frustrations of trying to find the translators, and that was wholly due to the intransigence of the New York City Board. So we were delighted to see that as part of the Civic Engagement Commission's founding, that you were tasked with developing the translation service, because that made it clear to the New York City Board of Elections that they had to accept translators in more than just the Voting Rights Act required languages. So I would like to echo and second the recommendations of our colleagues in the New American community. We rely on our colleagues in the Arab American Association, the New York Immigration Coalition, and the Chinese American Council, among others, for recommendations regarding the metrics which you should use to try and identify the languages. But I would like to make some additional suggestions. First, we have been strong supporters and I think successful advocates for the adoption of early voting here in New York State. And so I am concerned that you are shorting early voting in your thinking because of the limited experience in last November. We knew last November was going to be a low turnout election. That's why we had early voting start during that time period, so the kinks could be worked out without a large influx of voters. 2020 and 2021, we believe, is going to be very different. And our experience in other states shows that, as has previously been testified, the highest use of early voting does tend to be on the weekends. So we have 2 weekends, and I would urge you to seriously consider having translation services on both of those weekends, because as more people are familiar with early voting, and early voting was very successful this past November, so word of mouth is good. More people are going to take advantage of it, and it's absolutely predictable that the spikes will be on the weekends, and if you have the resources, to consider some extra help on the weeknights. There will be 2 weeknights, because that is when we see the most turnout for early voting. The second thing is that I would like to urge you to be completely transparent in your calculations. As our math teachers would tell us, show your work. One of the things that ended up being an irritant with Moya's program is that we didn't understand how they chose, which languages they chose, and which particular poll sites. So after you've concluded with your methodology and made the adjustments that have been suggested here, I would suggest to you that the final step is after you have applied that methodology to the data, release your calculations. It's just better for the public to see why you made the choices you made, and yes, there will be some people who will pull out their calculators and redo your calculations. That's a good thing. The other thing that I would suggest to you is because we are going to have such expected large turnout, both in 2020 and 2021, that you seriously consider an adjustment to your program between the 2020 election year and the 2021 election year. Use 2020 as a pilot, anticipating an equally large turnout for the city elections, because this is a city program. And I would suggest do not wait until September 2022. The calendar and the census calendar are against you. Unfortunately, when it comes to adjustments for the June 2021 primary, I don't know that you'll be able to factor in new census data, but I think you should take a look after the presidential cycle. How has the program worked, and make adjustments? So that when you're going into the city program, you feel that you have strengthened and improved the program. And then I would also ask, please, have a similar hearing to this one as you are developing your training program. As somebody who participated with Moya in developing the training and in actually training the trainers, there is a tremendous wealth of knowledge in this room and in our communities. And I think that the training program would definitely benefit from the experience of organizations that are here, those of us who have worked with voters over the years in different communities, to be sure that the training hits all of the things, the little peculiarities that we have experienced ourselves in trying to help voters. I think your training program will be stronger. I think your charge will have been obeyed, and I think the transparency is always welcome by the public. So we at Common Cause look forward to working with you on this program, and I know that, as has been mentioned, the actual recruitment of translators is tremendously challenging. And so we look forward to working with you on the training and on advertising the program and making it a model for the rest of the country to be as successful as it possibly can in ensuring that every eligible New Yorker has an opportunity to cast a ballot that they understand and that will be counted. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Are there clarifying questions? For Common Cause for Susan. Good?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next organization I have on the list is Muslim Community Network, Saad Kazliki. Sorry, did I say your name correct?
No, but that's okay.
Close enough. What is it?
Saad Heshki.
Heishi?
Heshki.
Heshki. Heshki. Okay, sorry.
Well, hi everyone.
Heshki. All right.
I'd like to start with the unusual request of could you please hand me back all your testimonies, because I will send one to Gagan tomorrow, which will be perfect. I have half an hour to make this up, so I would much rather present my best foot forward tomorrow, if you don't mind. Yes, I will send it back tomorrow, however. So to start, good afternoon. My name is Saad Keshki, and I deliver this testimony on behalf of the Muslim Community Network, a civil society-based nonprofit which is involved in religious diversity training. We do interfaith work, and my job is to be the civic advocacy coordinator, and I'm also the lead on the partnership with the Office of Hate Crime Prevention, where we are tracking hate crimes against Muslims. Now, however, today's conversation is about languages, Yes. The reality of language translations at polling sites cannot be stressed enough. If there's a true interest in seeing the community exercise in seeing the immigrant community exercise their civic right to vote. When considering the mobility that New York City offers with its extensive transport system network, it would also be logical to assume that many individuals will be exposed to information in locations other than their own neighborhoods. Therefore, and some of this information could be through pop-up polling sites, disseminating information for people where they can go to vote or where they should go to vote. And however, that would also mean that all these pop-up sites would have to have culturally appropriate language and literature, as well as appropriate language resources to be deployed at every polling site where people of various languages speak, which does happen, but I've heard in the past from other people who are far more active in political organizations that there have been issues, and that's not any one person's fault, but I guess there is a lack of understanding between the language required and who shows up. There's another factor that ties directly to language access, and that is outreach prior to elections. It is the responsibility of the political and government bodies to ensure that people are made aware of what elections are happening and to elaborate upon the importance of the vote. Having done some canvass in the 2018 state elections myself, my experience makes me confident in stating that there were considerable gaps in outreach with immigrant communities, in both awareness of the election themselves, as well as their essential role in voting. While there's a larger debate to be had on whether ESL and civic awareness should be made part of the immigration process, as of now, the city needs to put resources into providing ESL courses in all immigrant enclaves, as this will not only improve integration, but will also create a greater feeling of connectivity between communities and government systems. As of now, the best way to offer such connectivity will be by ensuring that both language access and outreach occur in tandem. MCN is already using such standards as we are conducting our hate crime surveys and advertising for the surveys through outreach, as well as flyers and surveys that are language appropriate to the communities we are working with. It would also be relevant to add here that MCN would be pleased to work with candidates, voter registration organizations, and government bodies to provide access to any communities and any CBOs where we already operate. With all of this, I would like to conclude that if anyone from the Office of Civic Engagement or any of the other esteemed audience members here wish to discuss the issue further, they can feel free to contact me at saad@mcnny.org. Thank you.
Are there clarifying questions?
In your second paragraph, you're asking, and I'll get back to the first part, that you want language appropriate resources at every polling site.
Yes, well, what I meant by that is, well, which is why I'm trying to rewrite it a little to get it for tomorrow. But what I was trying to say was that we need a method for information to be able to reach the public beyond their own neighborhoods. And like I said, I have to reword it. But you do need pop-up sites. You do need some way for people to get information on where to go, which they may not necessarily be in the neighborhood the whole day. They may be out to work.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. How does that happen? How does someone vote outside of where they live?
Well, they can't, but that's what I was saying, I have to rewrite that. But I was talking more from the information perspective.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a bit of a rush. Sure.
As a point of clarification, notices do go out by the Board of Elections to all registered voters. And I'm assuming that obviously the languages are limited that they use. I think they're using, how many, do you know how many languages they translate in notices to? I think they only do 4. I don't know if they do it by neighborhood, but that's a good question for us to consider in the future. This is going to become part of what the methodology that they will apply to in terms of notification, not the voting.
Yeah, I would just like to add to that, which is the factor that when it comes to languages, for example, in the Bronx, where I went recently, a large section of the Muslim community there speaks languages other than the ones even listed the 12, 14 you have over there, they're very specific dialects, and I understand how difficult that is. But the fact is, you are going to lead out large swaths of people if one does not get a little more precise with who is living where and what's going on. And I've noticed that difficulty in the work I'm doing, so that would be all. Thank you.
Another clarifying question?
No, I have a comment before we call the next witness.
Can you hold your,
It's just an apology that I have to leave, and she'll
Okay.
call us to schedule the meeting.
yes, thank you, Mark.
May I?
Yes, you.
So, yes.
I have one question.
No, please.
The Albanian community, I see that that's a language that we haven't even looked at.
Turkish.
And that is 500,000
Right.
New Yorkers in the Bronx.
Right.
I mean, they're not all in the Bronx, but I mean,
Right.
so that was. something-
Turkish would be another language.
Right.
I mean, and as I said, when we start talking about the African community, it's a whole new universe, as I'm learning.
So thank you for, and pardon the interruption, but I wanted to apologize that this meeting was scheduled at a time in which I'm supposed to be chairing another meeting uptown. So I'm taking my leave. It has nothing to do with anything anybody said. And I am sorry to hear those testimonies that I will be missing as I leave. And I'm sorry to my colleagues for having to leave, but I wanted to hear as much of it as I could, which leaves me in the awkward position of having to walk out in the middle. So forgive me and thank you very much for the testimony so far. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, the next person I'd like to call up is Jerry Vadamala from Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Vadamala. I'm the director of the Democracy Program at the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, ALDEF. ALDEF was founded in 1974 right here in New York City. We are a national civil rights organization. We are a racial justice organization. And our mission is to protect the civil rights of Asian Americans, and we do that through litigation, community education, organizing, and advocacy. ALDEF has been very involved in language assistance across the country. We have a long history here in New York City. We started poll monitoring and conducting an Asian American exit poll in 1988. That started here in New York City. We focused mainly in Manhattan and Chinatown, Lower East Side, in Brooklyn, and in Queens County. Our exit poll and poll monitoring has expanded to 14 states in Washington, D.C., across the country. We've had some problems with the New York City Board of Elections in ensuring full compliance with their requirements under the Voting Rights Act. So in 1992, when Chinese was required, Chinese language assistance, translation, and interpreters was required in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the board told us they could not fit the Chinese translation in those voting machines, the ones where you hit the lever. We had to print out on paper and show them that it could fit. And once we were able to convince them that it could fit and they were required to do it, they told us they would not transliterate the candidates' names into Chinese. We objected under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, and the Department of Justice at the time agreed with us and required the Board of Elections to fully translate the ballot, allowing 55,000 limited English proficient Chinese Americans to be able to cast a ballot. There were numerous other problems, including translation problems, Mandarin interpreters being sent to Chinatown, where everybody spoke Cantonese, Cantonese interpreters being sent to Flushing, where everybody spoke Mandarin. We had translation problems with a Chinese ballot. In the 2000 primary election in Brooklyn, the board had mistranslated Republican as Democrat and Democrat as Republican. Just to give you a sense of some of the problems that we observed through our poll monitoring and exit poll, we eventually sued the Board of Elections in 2006 for failure to comply with Section 203 for Chinese and Korean language assistance. And the board settled the case with us, and we have an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding with them, which includes a targeting methodology. And I'm happy to share that with this committee or commission, in that we do feel that it is a comprehensive targeting methodology that captures the correct number of poll sites where there is a need. We also, in 2013, had to sue the Board of Elections again for failure to comply with Section 203 for not providing Bengali ballots in Queens County. After our lawsuit, the board settled the case with us and provided Bengali ballots in the next election. The reason we had to sue them, we had 4 successive elections in a row where the board did not provide Bengali ballots, even though they were required to under the Federal Voting Rights Act. So I just want to give you a sense of the background there. We've done a lot of work with the board, and there are certain areas where we noticed there was a huge need from the community, but the Federal Voting Rights Act did not provide any type of relief for us, specifically for the Bengali-speaking community here in New York City. We sent numerous letters to the Board of Elections to specifically ask for Bengali interpreters at 4 specific poll sites in the Bronx and 3 specific poll sites in Brooklyn. Now again, we admit those counties are not covered in Section 203, and that was the short response we received from the board. We're not required to do it under the Federal Voting Rights Act, so sorry, you're out of luck. So we're pleased to see that there's another option that we have now through this commission. And I wanted to share these letters with you. I only have 2 copies, but I will provide electronic copies to whoever can receive them. You'll see that we sent these letters in 2014 and 2015. So now we're coming up on 5 or 6 years. And the effort predated those letters by at least a year or 2, where we've been begging for Bengali language assistance at targeted poll sites. We're not saying for every poll site in these counties, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx. And this is also, it's in response to community members. We work with community-based organizations across the city, and I think it's a problem, it's a mistake, to not receive input from these organizations. The Board of Elections has, through a consent decree with us, established language advisory committees. This is the best resource for administrators in determining if language assistance is effective. Right? We meet with the Board of Elections twice a year to relay any problems with Chinese and Korean language assistance. We also have an open line of communications with the board for Bengali language assistance. So I would urge this commission, beyond this hearing, I think establishing language advisory committees that are comprised of these community-based organizations, legal organizations such as ALDEF, that are doing work on election day. We are at poll sites conducting our Asian American exit poll, providing real-time voter protection in numerous poll sites across the city. We also have teams of poll monitors. These are attorneys and law students trained by ALDEF that are traveling to numerous poll sites across the city so we know where the problems are. And these are recurring problems. We're talking about specific targeted poll sites in the Bronx and Brooklyn. We know that Bengali is covered in Queens County. I urge you not to sort of overlook Bengali in general because it's covered in Queens County. There is a very specific and demonstrated need at targeted poll sites in the Bronx and Brooklyn. I'm going to close with this. This is our observation letter that we sent to the Board of Elections on February 22nd, 2019. This is after the midterm elections. We had several thousand Asian American voters that we interacted with on election day for the midterms of 2018, and we had teams of attorneys and law students trained by ALDEF that monitored numerous poll sites in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. You'll see that there were shortfalls of interpreters in every language for Chinese, Korean, Bengali, Hindi, and Punjabi. So even with the 203 language assistance, there are huge holes there. I urge this commission to take a look at the targeting methodology that we have with the Board of Elections for Chinese and Korean. I also urge you So you think about language advisory committees, they've worked really well in the ones that we've been a part of, and they give you that context and the connection to the groups that are turning out voters in those communities that are limited English proficient. They're the ones doing the outreach, the GOTV on election day. They're working with us, doing voter protection on election day. They're doing community education, candidate forums. So we need these groups in the room to provide some context and feedback. You'll get information like we have in those letters. Those letters that I submitted today, the process was started by community-based organizations saying, hey, we need Bengali interpreters at these poll sites in the Bronx and Brooklyn. So I hope you'll take that into consideration. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jerry. Do we have questions? No.
Thank you, Jerry. Your targeting methodology, is that all the targeting methodology?
No, that is the targeting methodology that the Board of Elections agreed to adopt in the consent decree.
And how does it compare? Maybe this is too big of a question. Are you planning to provide a written?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If it's too big of a question, maybe it would be helpful for you to sort of share with us how it compares to what we are proposing.
I think you're working with similar organizations that were involved in, like the City Planning Data, the City Planning Commission. There is significant overlap. I think they worked very closely with us in developing the methodology. There is the opportunity for community-based organizations to submit input where there are certain gaps, where the formula may not be perfect. It may not take into account some of the needs of the community. So that's why I'm pushing for the involvement of some type of language advisory committee. In my written testimony that I will submit, I'll give you more detail where there are differences, but there is significant overlap, which we're pleased to see.
Thank you.
Just a clarifying question. The CEC does have a language assistance advisory committee that's comprised of people from different, the 10 language groups at least and more. So are you saying that your recommendation is that we have a language advisory group for each language?
Yes.
Other clarifying questions?
Yeah, you could have that meeting with all the groups together. You could do that anyway, but I think there are specific needs for certain language groups, and it's good to have your own language advisory group for each language.
Got it.
You've given us a lot of information, and I know you had a lot of handouts and copies of the letters that you've submitted. If you could just make sure that those letters are also submitted to us in an accessible format, preferably a Word doc, would be beneficial. So I can also.
No, I'm happy to do that, and I just want to note there's a certain level of frustration too. Those letters, you take a look at the date, and this is from 2014. We've been struggling to get language assistance in some other places. We're happy to see other language groups receive language assistance, but we would like to be included in that too. And it's important that all groups, to the extent possible, receive the assistance that's needed.
Thank you, Jerry. Are there people who've, additional people signed up to offer comment who we didn't already cover? Okay, great. So it looks like we've covered everybody who signed up, which is great. So I'm going to now just open up for a brief period of discussion amongst the commissioners. If you'd like to offer any comment or thoughts on the comments that we received on the methodology, you're welcome to do so.
I think, sorry, I'm jump in right here. I think we should be looking at the recommendations of being as expensive as possible to help us ensure that, I agree with comment from Susan Lerner of let's use this year as a pilot year. so that we get it right next year when we have one of the biggest city elections that we haven't seen in over maybe past 8 years, right? So looking at how we restore or include 15 to 17-year-olds, not removing the non-citizen data, as we heard, over 170,000 non-citizens who are on the pathway to become citizens each year do naturalize, as well as 15 to 17-year-olds who then turn of age and are able to vote. That's a significant population that we're not looking at right now, and that would be a blind side on our part of not looking at it. And not looking at turnout or utilization of past services as factors, as you heard from, I think her name is Maria, who spoke from the Russian community. Even that program, which had a number of Russian translators under the Moya pilot program, there was a number of limitations in that program where you saw year one or election one where the Board of Elections refused to let them in and didn't stand in front of the building. Year two, they compromised after a judge asked them to, and they were allowed inside the building but placed wherever the Board of Elections deemed it appropriate, which was not accessible. And when we're talking about language accessibility, one big aspect of it is that it needs to be accessible. And lastly, I do want to point out that this last iteration of early voting was done for a slow election, a small election, and one that we, I think it was done intentional to see how the process would work out. And looking at that data is not going to be comprehensive into looking at the data of a presidential year or a year where we have all citywides on the ballot and about over 39 council seats on up for grabs as well. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Others?
Or just discussion?
You can ask clarifying questions. I can answer them.
Thanks. Are we hiring and training interpreters?
So far, the city has been using with a third-party vendor. We have not, we are required to promulgate rules related to interpretation, and Kwame, are you still in the room? He went out. Okay, so we are required to work on the rules for qualifications of interpreters. So we will have that as a separate conversation. Whether or not a third-party vendor handles the interpreters, I think is a separate question, but once we have the rules, we can ask the vendor to follow those rules. We're just talking about rules, Kwame, for interpreters. If you'd like to chime in on this. From the chart, the question was, are we using a third-party vendor? What kind of quality control will we have on the interpreters and their qualifications and, training? So I was talking about the requirement for us
So
to.
the commission has to consider proposed rules for minimum requirements for training. So that's something the commission should consider this year.
And like, who's the lead agency now at Poleside? Because, I hear a lot of conflict because of the Board of Education, Board of Elections, same DOEs, but this is the Board of Elections. And I think most people can empathize that there is confusion and sometimes authoritative control in general. So if we came up with certain procedures, how do we know that it gets implemented? Who's the lead agency? It's normally DOE. And how do we coordinate that?
My question was going to be also, to what capacity do we have to make recommendations to the BOE? Because a lot of what we're hearing here has very little to do with the mandate that we're trying to comply with. So a lot of it is frustration in the way the staff, the lack of training, the position of the translators are usually in the back of the cafeteria. You can't find them. the signage is almost non-existent. So a lot of these things are not part of this methodology conversation.
Right.
To what extent does this body have power to speak or recommend to the BOE further other than just this methodology?
Well, I think one of the things we need to remember is that there has been collaboration, operational cooperation on the ground on election day between the city's interpretation services and the Board of Elections, and that will continue for CEC as well. We're working together to provide services for New Yorkers, and we're as a commission are committed to that, to working together to do that. And then as far as the concerns that we heard today that may not be related to services that the commission's providing, but feedback on the BOE's programs. I mean, I think there are opportunities for people to submit those comments directly to the Board of Elections, and I also think that they're instructive for us because service provision is very challenging. It's not just for elections, but interpretation service is challenging overall. And the city providing any type of service is never a perfect process, and I think there's always opportunities to learn from the feedback that we heard today, including criticisms of Moya's program as well, as to how we can hopefully, do better. And, with continued cooperation, we can, I think, work together to improve the services that New Yorkers are receiving.
I have a question about outreach, because I was really pleased to hear all the testimony that we had today. I think it was very rich and informative. And a couple of different people mentioned the notion of outreach, and this is something we talked about at our last commission meeting, but I think, our service is going to be, it's going to fall on deaf ears and the polling sites unless we do sufficient outreach beforehand to notify the public that it's available. And if we are considering a methodology that divorces completely from registered voters, and then we don't have the same ability to contact people. So there will have to be a different type of outreach that to get to people who are non-citizens and younger. So I am interested in hearing about our resources to do that outreach and the potential for that, and how we, if we're going to rely solely on working with community-based organizations, or we're going to have lists of individuals to contact through utility bills. That's one part of the comment. The other part of the comment is, thinking about the testimony that we heard today, which, again, I think was terrific. I'm also interested in hearing from the groups that we didn't hear from, who are represented on our language list. I didn't see anybody here necessarily from the Haitian Creole community, the Polish community, a few others. So I'm hoping that we can tap our own language advisory group, to get some really pointed feedback from them.
Thank you. Those are really good comments. We are going to circle back with folks, particularly on the communities that were not represented here today, to make sure that we get input from them for sure. And then also, I think your question about the Commission's outreach plan is very critical. We do need to work on that, and that's part of the work we'll be doing with the Language Assistance Advisory Committee, is helping us think through how we help people become aware of services, because I think, again, it's true of every single service that anyone offers, like you can create it, but if you don't let people know about it, then you see the rates of utilization are low, and it's because you haven't done the outreach, so very important.
Can I just, before we get too far away from it, back to Chuck's question about who provides the language translation, I think that we should, if it's not set, or will be set very soon, I think we should just look at the third-party vendor agreement and ensure that there's also the possibility for translator worker co-ops to be part of that. I'm not sure if they are. And there are growing cooperatives that are here based in the city.
And to that, can we write a letter with some of the recommendations we heard today to the BOE, or is that out of the scope of the work we're supposed to do here?
I think we are actually, the city has a conversation with BOE and is cooperating in terms of implementing pole site interpretation services, right? This is like, that is happening, and there is ongoing coordination, and so we will become a part of that. We have also reached out, and we will, have our own meeting to discuss the work that we'll be doing. And this is just the beginning phase, right? We proposed a methodology. We're looking for public input. We hope to improve on what was proposed, and definitely very committed. I think we all share that commitment to and some of you actually work at the polls, so you know what it's like. So we will work towards that for sure. Yeah.
I'm wondering about our capacity to expand the language advisory committees. I think that was a really compelling recommendation. And I'm particularly interested in those hard to reach communities or those language groups that haven't shown up, right? Like Albanian, for example.
Yeah.
Right?
I think this goes to the question of outreach, and something we've talked about before as well, which is that it's hard to imagine a universe in which every single person who needs interpretation is served by our program or the BOEs, and so
it should certainly be our vision.
No, I mean I think but I think also that people are not informed of their rights and their ability to bring their own interpreter into the poll site, and that's something we can help in the interim, is to educate people about their rights, whether it's for poll site interpretation or for the disability community, that you can bring someone to assist you, and we should just make sure that that's part of the outreach effort. And Moya actually does do that.
But we have data. The data we're using for this program has information about who these people are. Something as simple as some sort of notification that will talk about their voting rights, but also where they can go to get these services once we have a program.
Yes.
I think that's what you're talking about. As an immigrant, bilingual resident myself, it took a while to get something in 2 languages. And I don't know why, but now it looks like we know better now than 80s and 90s. So I think to your point is, we can have a perfect program, but if we do not spend the dollars or the resources or build the partnerships to get into those communities, it will sit somewhere where no one's gonna use it, which is what I witness now a lot when I go vote. And I'm not sure if my community is just becoming English proficient, or it's just that no one knows that the translator is sitting there for them.
I have one final comment. So I just want to echo the sentiment, the point that was made earlier, that the recommendations were excellent, and I'm sure we've got really smart people who are going to really think about how we integrate those. So I have confidence that we will come up with something that really reflects the thinking of our colleagues and advocates. I really want to underscore the importance of the oversight and the quality piece, because that's not squarely in our mandate. And we've all said it in different ways, and we've heard it from testimonies, that we could have the perfect program, absolutely well-designed program, but the sort of magic is in the implementation, and that is not just about developing a set of rules around it, but I think we also need to think the next step ahead, which is how do we monitor, how do we ensure quality control, and that is incredibly resource intensive. And so, right, and so I'm just echoing the points that were made, but just to underscore, I think for me that's the biggest takeaway from tonight.
One other thing that I'd like to add is we heard a lot about the senior community, and as much as we're working hard to integrate available language interpretation, if these seniors can't see it, and it's even in their own language, then we're not getting anywhere. So I would just urge the commission to really work with the mayor's office, the people with disabilities, and whatever outreach that we do, we have to ensure that it is in a large enough font for these individuals to be able to physically see it in whatever language that it needs to come by.
No, I echo that, but it's not about seniors alone. You know, because we have a lot of people with disabilities that are not seniors. So I think we should, in fact, get the font at least larger, so, because I can't see it with my glasses on. So,
Well, I know my guide dog's not gonna read it, so I have the same issue.
yeah, so. But I feel like we have a lot that we've gotten from this. This was actually very good. I'm thinking about our data sets. Maybe we need to look from what some people that testified were saying. We need to broaden our data sets, or just to look at it in a different way, which would be fine. And I think that's something that we might need to incorporate in it, because then we may be able to capture a larger amount of people by doing that. And also the availability of information, being able to get the information out to the community, all of the communities. Actually, the most basic bit of information is what you actually said, Sarah, about people knowing that they can take, right now, they can take someone to the polls with them, because BOE has not promulgated that information. You know, it's not even on anything that you receive from them, saying they tell you about the elections, they tell you about how to vote, but nowhere does it say, you know, if you need an interpreter, you can bring one to the polls with you. And I think that's key to a lot of things. A lot of the language, people that are, you know, English is not their first language, they'll be able to plan to when they go to the polls. Even though when we do this, they won't have to because we're great, but but I think that's an important thing that needs to get out there.
There are charter requirements for us to work on an outreach plan, a notification plan for the public, as well as a process to monitor and respond to public complaints about the services that the CEC would provide.
Okay, so that's in our scope.
Yes, so it's specifically written for us to work on that.
From a quantitative process, there is a problem with the 15-year-olds and above right now. That's taking 2 points. One is the assumption that we don't update the data in the next 3 years at all. And if that's the case, then that's really a problem for us. The other problem is going to be that the next 3 years, you're actually targeting people that will not vote, which means the effectiveness in the next 3 years of who we outreach to is non-existent people. So you really got to look back and say that, you know, if we're charged that we're going to do every cycle, then the data should be updated on every cycle, and not be looking down 3, 4, 5 years down the road, because you're going to be targeting people right now. Say my grandson's 15 years old, hoping he's going to vote, but meanwhile he's going to be part of the subset, and he's non-existent, and be non-existent for the next 3 years, which means that going back to get a quantitative and qualitative analysis of how good we do in each voting cycle, the numbers are going to be diluted and incorrect. So this isn't about giving someone an opportunity to vote. It's not changing that situation at all. But it's really, you're putting non-existing voters into a base right now. More importantly, is the voter base should be updated every year, and then fresh data gets taken into account.
Yeah, the problem with the data of looking at just 15 to 17-year-olds, and you're saying, you know, that we should be looking at it every year, even when the ACS studies, surveys done, it takes time for it to come out. So you still need to keep going back to the same ACS data that is old. So if you're looking at 2017, let's say 2016, and you're looking at a 50-year-old, now they're 18, it's 2020, or they turned 18 in 2019. It's at the rate of when you're getting the data out, and the data doesn't come out very quickly. It takes time, and they put it out in pieces. So by the time you get the full report back of the data that's assessed, it's already 2 or 3 years later. So that's why if you include them, and that's how the city, I think, if I'm not sure if anyone here from City Department of Planning is here, we should really assess what is the data that we're looking for and how soon the city gets it. Because maybe the city's getting it before we do, as the general public. But I think that partial data releases aren't
Can the
complete
city
data.
tell us how old the data that we're using for these methodologies? Is it 3-year-old data or not? And that's it. That's the question.
Peter, would you like to just comment on how long it takes for the data to be available to the public and what impact that has in terms of the validity of the data?
It's about 1 year old. The data we use are just over 12 months old. So if you do it every year, it's about 12 months old.
Look, my only intent is to get the best data to reach the best market. It's not a matter of excluding or including people, because like I said, that's not changing the voter population. That's not making it come out or not come out. It's a matter of whether or not you're gonna get the most effectiveness. And look, we want a program for putting this much time and effort into this as a commission. We wanna make sure that we're effective. We don't wanna have poll sites where, we expected, 200 people to show up and 6 people show up. And then we look at ourselves, how that happened. Well, there's a lot of reasons.
Well, my comment about that is you don't want to plan to leave anyone out. You want to plan to include everyone. So I understand your concerns.
But we want to include voters, not everybody that's alive in the
But
district.
the point of the non-citizen and 50 plus, I guess we have to discuss it a little bit better, and it won't happen probably right now for you to really understand it. In immigrant communities, and the way this country is moving right now, if you look at the data of the New Immigration Coalition as to how many new immigrants become naturalized, it's like insane. We're including it in the data.
I think what we can do is we can look at what the numbers look like.
Yeah,
That's something for data
I'm-
analysis, rerun the numbers, right? And
Yeah, we
can get.
you can pull out how many folks are becoming U.S. citizens.
Right, daily.
Yeah, and it's happening on an annual pace. The actual number was mentioned, I think it was 86,000, a little bit over 86,000 in testimony. But I'm going back to the ACS data, and what's referenced here and what we've given to people is the 2017 ACS data sample.
Right.
And by my accounts, that's 3 years old.
Right.
So if we are going to continue to, I want us to be as intentional as possible in this process. So if we're gonna use 3-year-old data.
We should plan for 3-year-old moving forward too.
So if 2017 is the date that we're referencing the data from, then we should look at the 15, 16, 17-year-olds who by now are probably 18.
Correct.
So just to clarify on that, we did say that partly because of availability issues, we did use the 2017, but for the final it will change, and it still doesn't address your issue of it being in data, but to clarify that, we are going to be using 2014 to 2018 data, 5-year data, for the methodology that, for the next round of analysis.
Yeah, because it's partially released in the bids. So the goal is to ensure that we're using.
We're including the most people.
Yes.
That will need the services.
Yes, and so I think that that's the other thing that I guess I wanted to just put a reminder out there is trying to compare the different sources of data, their quality, and also we want to cross-check data sources, right? So it's not like we're only using the American Community Survey data. We're also using data that, could potentially about, I know we don't want to, but turnout data, for example, as a cross-check, because we want to make sure that we are using the data that's available recognizing its limitations. But again, one of the things I've learned through this process is that the ACS data is actually the best data that's available to us.
Yeah, and we've used the data to present this methodology from the 2017 data set that is fully available, not partially, as other years after that. So I think we just want to be as expansive as possible with our limited purview that we are already, in, but at the same time, not excluding people or undercounting communities as we're going through this process, because that would undermine our mission here, right?
Other comments from the commissioners? Discussion on anything you heard? I just want to check with the folks who are seated in the back. Are there any other commenters or that we left out? Sadly, raising your hand.
I just have one thing to say, which is just to be clarified, it's not only non-citizens who aren't registered to vote. There are lots of citizens right now who are not registered at all. So I was just going to mention that as an important point to remember.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Hi. Has it been considered to have something like a reverse phone bank where if I'm at the polling site, my particular language is not being, there's no interpreter available? A central place where the majority of the languages are at a phone place, a phone location that I can call, that the poll workers have an 800 number or something like that, that I can call and get some assistance by phone, even if not physically present. Would that solve anything, even by borough or?
We have not considered that approach.
I could say the New York City Board of Elections doesn't permit the use of phones inside polling places. So the use of phone-assisted language assistance is not a possibility currently. So that's why real-life translators are used.
What is the prohibition on phone?
Well, it is a general prohibition on the use of phones and electronic devices while a person is in the voting booth, and it has been upheld in courts. But still, it's a prohibition for the use of those devices while you're voting. And the way those individuals get the assistance they need is from a real-life person providing the interpretation services, or a family member, or someone else who can do that.
Okay, any other questions, comments? So I just want to thank everyone who came today and shared their comment with us. And I want to also remind people, if they haven't already submitted their comments electronically, to please do so by email or going onto the CEC website, and there's an online form that you can complete. Also want to remind people that the comment period is open until March 1. So if you know of folks, CBO partners, community members, individuals who you think would be interested to submit comment, please encourage them to do so. We are the Civic Engagement Commission. This is our first public hearing. We would love to have, engagement with the work that we're trying to do, and really want to, again, remind people it's open until March 1, so hopefully we will get more comments in through the online options. So if no one else has any other thoughts or comments, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this hearing. Do I hear thank you? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion is carried and we're adjourned. Thank you.